Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Unit 14 of Managing Brands Over Time across Geographies under Block 4. Today, we are going to look at how the brand's approach is tweaked to building global brands. Most of the discussions that we had in the previous units were looking at brands in the markets where they are operating, in which they are manufactured, they are offered to the markets. Today, we are looking at the global market scenario and how brands brace up to the opportunities across the global opportunity. Uh, we'll be in today's unit. We'll be talking also about a standardized and a customized marketing strategies that are adopted with respect to brands for marketing them in the international market or the global market. We'd also explore the various strategic options that are available to brand managers and how to manage the brands over a period of time. Because we are looking into brand sustenance, brand equity, and brand value, which can be leveraged upon in the future course of time. So we are looking to the first thing is as to the how the international markets look into. Take a sneak peek into the Interbrands rating of the top 100 brands, just to show you a glimpse of that picture. In 2021, if you see here, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and Samsung were the top five most valuable brands of 2021, as found out by Interbrand, one of the leading brand consulting firms based out of UK. It was followed by various other brands like Coca-Cola, the Toyota, Mercedes-Benz, McDonald's, and the Walt Disney Company. Now, all these top 10 agency brands which we are talking about are definitely big global brands. When you talk about global brands, one thing that runs consistently or common factor among them is about their global footprint, the presence across the globe in every nook and corner of the globe. And they've been able to leverage that very well to make the brand stay in the marketplace and give better returns to the organization. But the reason why brands would expand or get into the global markets or in the international markets, the reasons can be varied. And we would like to look at some of the reasons that we are looking at. As you can see here in the in the local market, when the competition hots up and the markets become saturated, that would definitely call for the brand managers to look for greener pastures outside the domestic market. And maybe the market has also becoming sluggish in the domestic market, and you need to know if there are existing untapped potential which is existing in the international market, which can be looked upon for enhancing the brand's presence in the international markets. Currently, if you look into thanks to the aviation industry and most of the liberalized policies which are adopted by the countries across the globe, it has also given rise to a huge mobility of international for target customers across the globe. So whether it's for work function, they are going for immigration, whether for any other reasons, we find that there is a huge shift taking place from the concentrated markets to diverse markets. So that is one area which also throws open in terms of opportunities that one would like to venture, a company would like to venture in the international circuit. Secondly, if you're looking into cost of production being controlled, obviously certain markets across the globe provide economies of scale thanks to the legal protection which is given by the governments out there, or ease of doing business. So that what propels them to set up their units there and can offer those products in those markets. Obviously, it is definitely a reduction of business risk, so that you do not concentrate on only one market. It's a domestic market for your business purposes. One has to look into the opportunities propounded by the international markets as well, which means there are plenty of opportunities of varying degrees of challenges built into it. But let's look into the phase of internalization and internationalization. It does not happen in one go that a firm would focus from a domestic market to the global market in one shot. There is a phase in which they would like to grow into the internationalization process. So we will look into that in tandem. So when you look into the first step that a company would look, a company would look for reinforcing reinforcing the desire to go to the other country for whatever reasons that we talked about would be to identify as a market or a country which the brand can enter. Obviously, things like market potential needs to be assessed. How easy is to enter that market? What is the ease of doing business? What is the kind of infrastructural facilities? And what are the taste and preferences of the people whom we are targeting exist in those countries? Also looking at the various presence of competitors in that marketplace and what are your capabilities in servicing that market in terms of conveniences. So this is the first step. Next we move to is the modus operandi in terms of how do we enter that market. And when you look into that, it could be situations like it could be here the government might step in and say that okay, would they encourage direct investments, full control investments, or they're looking into joint ventures, tie-ups, or strategic alliances with the local partners so that they can help to the local businesses also to flourish along with the global partners. So in India, you'll find in certain sectors we have we are allowed to only enter in terms of joint venture. For example, the insurance market. So there are many other areas where in Gulf countries, if one wants to get into the Gulf market, they would essentially look into joint partnerships in JVs, so that they can both can leverage upon the opportunities that is existing in the international market. Uh, but then, having said that, the companies may choose to enter not full hog, but go in a smaller way of starting from a smaller amounts of product range to a larger and to a larger extent as we go along, given the response from that market, and also the kind of entry that you need to make and what kind of portfolio, what kind of product portfolio you need to establish there is the critical function that one has to look into. Once we have identified the market entry process, next comes is the how would the firm basically tweak or customize or change the marketing strategy of its brand so that it is there in in the international market as a potential player. And over the period of time, it may also acquire new brands from the local market. They may get into acquisitions and mergers with local markets for enhancing the portfolio in those marketplaces. If you see Nokia's experience, they did get enter into the mobile handsets, and when they entered to increase the market penetration, they did capitalize on the low affordability to cater to the low affordable segment because they were very strong in the feature phones. So while in the initial stage of its entry in the Indian market, most of the products were being brought from the outside, from the host country or from the country where it was home country where it was manufactured. But later on, they put up their own infrastructure out here to cut down the costs and be able to cater to the market well. Then comes the question of once you have established that, how do you get experience of the international markets? It may talk about in those markets, when you're looking into the criticalities which are existing in those markets, one has to understand whether we need to put up an infrastructure, whether we need to have a distribution network of our own, or should we have a piggy banking on the existing players. And obviously, when we are looking into the geographical locations across the globe, this part of the internationalization process calls for a major effort in terms of investments. So allocation of resources, putting money into the blog, these are some of the objectives that brand managers have to grapple with before they are going for the enhancing their presence in the international market. Last but not the least, when the local market concerns should be looking into how they are looking into a globally aligned strategy, because most of the markets are slowly opening up. So the degree to which most markets open up would also talk in terms of whether the company would like to open up in a slow manner or would like to take care of their opportunities as are provided to them. There are few cultural contexts which comes into the when you're talking about the global market scenario, especially when you deal with very small things like the emotional aspects of the culture, the rituals, the kind of the, the kind of lifestyle that they have. One need to dive deep into that in order to make your the digital the globalization concept a reality. Most of them have been Capcom, for example, Apple, when it entered, in, as you can see in the example here in 90s, they wanted to bring the global appeal of the brand to the markets where they were operating. So they took the help of taking legendary names like John Lennon, uh, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Einstein, basically to push or to convince or to make a compelling, connect with the people out there. Now, there are a few other things which are also critical from the cultural concept and context when we are looking into operational in the global field. For example, words, symbols, colors have different meanings across the globe. So when we are looking into these opportunities, we need to bring it into the fold in terms of the what the brands can convey to the markets. So for example, if you're operating in Turkey, which is a very patriarchal society, and versus America, which is far more where the patriarchal society is not it's not that strong. I mean, everybody has equal say. So when you're operating, what you're communicating, what kind of values that you are standing for, does play an important role. Uh, for example, there are a few more examples which have been given here. I would like to reiterate that, which basically talks about the cultural aspects being very, very important. One is during the campaign of Kame soap in Japan. They showed a presence of the Japanese husband in the room while the wife is taking bath. Now, this is not considered to be very tasteful in Japan. So obviously, such kind of things can be really watered off. One has to be very sensitive about these issues. Uh, like another good case is that of a soft drink which was introduced in Gulf, carried something on stars with pointed on it with an attractive label, and the Arabs rejected outright because it was perceived to be that the stars with some kind of a tag on pointed stars pointed out to the Israeli kind of stance. So they felt that anything that is pro-Israeli is hated upon in the Gulf market. So obviously, even if it is the product was good, it did not connect with the because the kind of symbols that we use was not in sync with the market requirements. In Taiwan, for example, Pepsi came up with say uh, coming alive with Pepsi. So yes, it was something which was talking about an adrenaline rush respected to the brand, but when it got translated in the local language at Taiwan, it says that as if you are Pepsi will spring up people from the dead like their ancestors. So it evoked a very different kind of response from the customers, and customers disengaged with the offer. So one has to be a little bit more sensitive looking into the dynamics of the international market. If you look into the kind of strategy that the approaches that are available to marketers in case of the global marketing opportunity, primarily hinges on two parts. Basically, it looks at us as you look into the opportunities and enter multiple geographies, you would be dealing with either standardization or we would be looking into customization. Understanding when you're talking about standardization, everything gets more or less the same brand with the same brand identical position, the same offering, the benefits, which are universally correct or universally standardized can be considered are provided in the international market. But then this marketing strategies also has certain advantages and disadvantages. On the other hand, the other extreme, if you're talking about highly customized approach, where you're talking in terms of how the brands can basically be tweaked or can be customized to the elements of the marketing that is the local cultures have to project, or the taste and preferences of the markets of where they are operating. So these are two extreme. One is talking about standardization, the other one is talking about a customization. There are very much advantages and disadvantages also, but we're looking at the advantages of a standardized approach. So in a standardized approach, the biggest advantage that you get is in form of the cost, because you achieve cost efficiency in the home country, and you would like to offer that across the globe as well. So obviously your cost implications come down significantly. And of course, you don't have to, if you're talking about a standardized product which is meant for the globe at large, yes, you may have to invest money into R&D, but the point is that is not going to, it is not going to change according to the global diversities. Like for example, a smartphone, the example that has been given here is all that of Apple. Wherever you talk about the Apple design, identical patterns, the pricing, the promotion, more or less remains the same. As a leverage, what can happen is that you are able to reach out to your ideas much faster in a given market, and also can learn from the experiences of companies across different countries based on their inputs, and then make few suggestions or changes in the future. In terms of image and quality also, we have been harping that for brand image and service and quality, we must look into consistency. So obviously standardized products has got everything built into it, saying that whatever the products are, wherever they are available, they bring the same experience, the same kind of benefits to the consumers. So the brand associations, which is if it is a positive one, it goes from one market to another and plays in a positive manner. Coordination becomes slightly easier because the uniform and standardized approach helps the global brands to convey a very strong message across the multiple without minimal interventions. So it becomes easy to adhere to and also monitor. But customized approaches, I would say, is the call of the day, where most of the global brands talk in terms of changing their strategy according to the needs of the customers of different market. Because ultimately, when you look in from a marketing perspective, we must offer brands which are relevant to that market. So obviously, it calls for some amount of changes, some amount of tweaking, change in their stride in the strategy. So we need to understand that across the globe, the socio-cultural fabric, the lifestyles, and the way people think about also changes significantly. So one has to keep that in mind while you are extending or when you're customizing your products in those markets or brands in those markets. Another thing is that you can tweak your strategy if you're following a customized approach according to the law of the land, across what kind of tariffs or what kind of taxes that would be there. You adapt your strategies much faster than in case of a standardized model. So obviously, a case in point would be that most of the electronic equipments which are offered in the markets are governed by government regulations in terms of what is the kind of electric voltage requirements would be there. So if you are into electrical equipment manufacturing business, obviously that needs to be looked into, or converters have to be provided for people who are entering those markets. And obviously it talks about the accepting the rule of the land, and as well as tweaking their own strategy to make it more acceptable. In terms of infrastructure, I think it is very, very important that the resources, the infrastructure, or the support across the different markets are not the same. So when it comes to a kind of a global marketing, efforts, there will be differences in marketing infrastructure. So one, if you are following a standardized approach, obviously it will be a problem for you in terms of establishing that in the marketplace. So certain amount of tweaking would be required. Case in point is that in India, for example, because the electrification may not be there, we may have to go for other alternative mechanisms for the advertising campaigns, which could be like participating in a fair and talking about uh, some kind of radio is very common. So we talk about community radio programs instead of going for the other high-end, high decibel campaigns, which may not be actually applicable in those areas. We should also look into the local competition. For example, in case of, I've already explained in the surf example, mostly in other markets, surf fights with Thatcher or Coca-Cola with Pepsi. But in India, when they came here, they found that there are other local products which are equally good or could give a threat to them. As a result, they had to acquire them, like Coca-Cola acquired Thumbs Up. That is a very common thing. In case of HUL, Surf and Ariel, I think we found that a local market player like Nirma posed a big threat, and they had to counter it by giving some kind of a real response in form of wheel. And obviously, you have to understand the local competition to fight back the marketplace. Another degree of customization is very well example. The example that is shared here is that of Netflix. I think Netflix has been one of the most strongest player in the customized market, and this has been able. They've been able to garner market share in the OTT platform in a big way because they understood the market of India and they found that the mobile penetration is extremely high. So the OTT platform was tweaked to the mobile platforms, and and that became a kind of a highly customized area in every geography of India to create content which would align with these requirements. So if you see here, the Indian flavor, they managed to give a subscription on a monthly basis, which was so one has to understand that they had to keep a monthly subscription for to offer to the market and to the consumers. As a result of which, what happened? Customers could link up with the monthly usage. So what they did was, instead of giving a yearly package, they customized it to the Indian requirements. As a result of it, the Indian consumers could use it more often rather than going for a larger product. And also, not only that, they brought in a lot of changes in that content which was Indianized, so that the local population could appreciate their efforts and could get better acceptance for their products and services. Let's look into the marketing strategy. Let's look into the marketing strategy which companies follow to look into the global requirements. I would like to take an example here. I will show you here in the graph. As you can see here, we'll take two examples of a firm which is following a customized approach. A is following a customized approach. B is following a standardized approach. And across the business functions, as you can see, what can be the kind of leverage? If you see, this is taken from Welch and Hoff. As you can see here, the standardization, whether it has been accepted in partial or in full. When you talk about the business functioning with respect to R&D, you'll find in case of standardization, the firm A being able to apply that in totality, whereas in case of B, they've been able to partially standardize it and tweak it according to the requirements. In manufacturing, the customization by standard A has been tweaked to a certain extent, partial, not completely, but in standardization full, because that is the demand of that market. So according to the market requirements, the degree of customization and standardization can also be leveraged upon, because that is going to be a very critical factor in terms of the products being accepted in those global market scenarios. Let's look into the cultural sensitivities. If you're in a customized here, again it will be mostly partial, because again you have to what extent you are tweaking your products, because products can be tweaked according, there's a limitation to which you can do. In standardization there is also partial kind of a impact in terms of the products being offered to the marketplace. But cultural sensitivities are mostly has to hinge on certain degree of connectedness with not only the functional aspect of the product, but the emotional aspect of the culture. So that is going to be a critical part of the marketing communication that the marketers engage in order to connect with the customers. If you look at the product design, obviously it needs to be in case of A, which is a standardized model, obviously it could be standardized completely, but in case of B, which is customized, you could look into certain amount of tweaking, so it could be partial tweaking. In terms of price, more or less, if you're talking about customized, it will be more or less A is mostly standardized, so it will be mostly customization will be very less. But in terms of B, which will be, I'm sorry, A is more customized, so it will be partial, but in B it will be standardized because it is mostly fully standardized. So price will remain more or less same, because in the standardized model you don't change it. In case of promotion, obviously B would face problem will be partial customization, because though they are following a standardized model, some changes need to be done, so there will be partial amount of development. In case of A, which is highly customized, the distribution would be very tweaked to the market requirements. But there will be, in case of a standardized model, it will be slightly, the distribution strategy needs to be a little bit partial, according, not, I would not say completely partial, but yes, to whatever extent, because the global market scenario also is of critical whether they have those kind of capacities to offer. In case of, in markets which are open markets, where there is a single amount of degree of differences, you'll find that in terms of certain markets, you will find that the standardized models are much better compared to the customized model. But generally, customized models are, wherever you find that there is a standardized model, it should be there. It should be fully or partially implicated in all the countries, maybe on in different countries looking into the requirements. In terms of customization, there has to be a very small portion which needs to be standardized, whereas majority of the customization has to come from in terms of which country they are operating in. So this global marketing planning matrix help depending upon whether you are adopting a customization or a standardization process. Now there are various factors which are also impacting the decision to go. So when you're talking in terms of product and packaging customization, and this in this case, what happened? The nature of the product definitely tells you what should be the packaging norms. Because in some cases you'll find that the packaging has to adhere to certain norms given by the country where they are offered. The stage of market development, whether the product is in a very nascent stage in another market, would depend upon whether we should go for the product at all or we should not go for the product at all, or we should go for a modified thing, or we could start at the initial stages. The customization is, when you talk about customization, the cost involved could be another factor in terms of customization, because that could significantly increase. In terms of the legal aspects, again, I've told you, law of the land has to be understood by everybody when they are entering the international market. So one has to adhere to that. So your product has to tweak according to that. And similarly, packaging norms, like what should be the information that you want to pass in your packaging, is to be very clear. Further, we look into competition. The basis of competition can also differ in different regions, and necessitating, we could depends upon what is the level of competition in different markets. It can the customization can be impacted. Uh, what about the support systems? So obviously, when you talk about distribution, I told if you remember in marketing mix, among all the mixed elements, distribution is one of the most important part and also very cost implicated area in terms of the marketing strategy. So similarly, in case of global markets, the availability and presence, what kind of presence they have in those domestic market, what kind of support system are there is also going to be very critical in terms of the product getting packaged. In terms of physical environment, that's another important factor which needs to be understood in terms of the product aspect. With what kind of product we are going to give. For example, I'll give you uh, Dove, which is talks about moisturizing content. If you see the product in case of US market and in Indian market, that's a significant difference. That is essentially because the moisturizing content may not be required too much in Indian market compared to the US market, which is predominantly more colder climate compared to India. Of course, now with the climatic changes, temperatures are spiking up all across the globe. So one needs to also look into whether that kind of a difference makes sense. And we are talking in terms of market conditions. When you're talking customization, obviously that is a critical thing. Depending upon how customers accept or reject, we look into the globalization issue. And in terms of product customization, whether it need to customize the product, is it going to cost me more? Because end of the day, the product should resonate with the customers. It should also talk in terms of whether the cultural elements are aligned to the local market requirements. If it does not, then perhaps we need to take a beating. We need to look at it. Take a leaf out of what McDonald's did in terms of making their products changes in India, going vegan and making a vegan as a sort of product range, which basically helps to meet the taste and preferences of the Indian consumer, as a result of which they've been able to garner better market share. Coming to the packaging part, we have already seen product and packaging are go hand in hand. So obviously we look into the important consumption parameters. When we look into pack size, like for example, milk or when you talk in terms of detergents, when you talk about shampoos, you'll find that the SKUs or the pack patterns, consumption patterns determine the kind of pack sizes which go well. You may come up with a Coca-Cola 1 2 liters bottle, but is this what is being consumed in this market in such large numbers? Many people say that if you buy in bulk quantities, it will be catered to, it will be better preferred, but not necessarily. Certain markets like buying in bulk. In some cases, they don't like buying in bulk. So pack sizes can be looked into from that particular area. Cultural sensitivity in terms of design, culture, which culture appreciates what culture. For example, blue could be appreciated in certain markets, but not be certain in other markets. White and black is considered to be auspicious or inauspicious according to the local sensitivities. Climatic conditions again are very important in terms of what kind of packaging you need to do. It should not be packaging where it will destroy due to extreme humidity or whatever. Uh, Local language labeling, I think labeling is goes again very important part of your packaging because it's like a silent salesperson. So what you are capturing in terms of labeling is very, very important. If you have a local connect to that, it always helps. The kind of distribution channels where they're there, what kind of shelf life does it have, shelf spaces does it continue, does it get offered to, pack sizes and packaging play a very, very important role, right? So pack sizes are a critical part of the story. Another modification is the pricing strategy. I think pricing strategy will not be said that some brands in the past have been looked upon in terms of whether the brand is able to uh, enter the market and obviously pose a challenge in terms of competitiveness to the consumer going and buying. So affordability being a very important factor, the cost of distributing it, the kind of margins that you'll be operating, and of course the government framework in terms of and also they would also determine the pricing strategy. Secondly, we also need to look into what kind of a competitive strategy is the firm entering that market. Are you going with a cost leadership strategy or a differentiation strategy? Mostly, the modification pricing happens if you're in cost leader position. That's well and good, but then cost leadership in one market does not mean cost leadership in other market. So one has to understand in the host country wherever that is being launched, you are going there may not be as a cost leader. So you need to understand whether a differentiated strategy makes sense. Very good case is that is given of Coca-Cola. When Coca-Cola introduced rupees 5 pack size in the early 2000 with the Amir Khan, that punch, right? So obviously they've been able to tweak it according to the Indian market conditions. Players like Uber and Amazon, again, which are global giants, they have created such kind of payment terms which are aligned to the local market requirements. As a result of it, it has got a better acceptance today in the marketplace. If you look into things like Revlon and all that, which had a kind of very premium image, which had a very general image in the international market, but they were launched in India with a premium image because Indians always considered the abroad, the brands which are coming from outside the home market to be considered to be a kind of a novelty rather than a kind of a aspirational value rather than a utility value. So certain markets where Revlon is in US is considered to be a general mass marketed product, but here it becomes a kind of a niche product or a premium product appealing to very few people. Distribution, obviously, as you know, distribution is an important part and it is basically tweaked on the basis of the purchase patterns. And in any market, whether it's domestic or the global market, companies always want to have a very strong hold over the channel members. So how are the channel members mapped out? If you're going through a kind of a joint venture with them, what kind of things that will go into that? What kind of regulations are there? Where are the warehouses? What are the transportation facilities? What kind of infrastructure they have? All these play to the impacting the distribution strategy in the marketplace. A few changes which is, as you can see in case of lubricants, Castrol, looking into the Indian market conditions, it was found that instead of selling in the petrol pumps, they found other alternative distribution outlets to sell that. And if you see in Japan also, most of when Kodak wanted to enter the market, the local competitors put up so much of barriers that they had to look for alternate mechanisms to reach out to the target audience. Coming to the communication, which is the promotion part, again, as I told you, what you are going to profess is going to be very critical. So we look into what means where, the cultural elements, the sensitivities, because what is being contained in your ad is of critical importance in the other market. So the brand positioning and communication may have to be standardized and may be tweaked according to the market condition. For example, Amazon launched the Apni Dukan campaign, where the first time offline shoppers, they, instead of looking at Amazon as a foreign entity, managed to perceive that okay, it's something which is easily they can associate with, and it helped in reducing that risk perception in the minds of the people. KitKat in other markets is a very classic example of KitKat. When it entered in the Japanese market, they found that if you can change it, the instead of taking a break, it was considered break should be more in terms of it. If you talk about breaks in your communication, it can be having a negative impact. So what they said that they found that in Japan there is something called an entrance examination that students go through for getting into the college. So that is called Zuken. So they identified this entrance examination where larger number of Japanese students went into appearing that. So they said that, and they named KitKat as Kitokatsu. So which meant is it's a sheer win. So when you associate slightly changing the logos, what happens is that it has got a better acceptance in the marketplace, and in the process have better results in those places. In fact, the sales shot up by 150% in those markets. We have seen that many brands which have followed a standardization process, to they've been able to tweak it slightly to the local market. Several brands have also been using standardization process to reach out to their target audience. Something like Mastercard, iPhone, right? Some of them have a component of themes remaining globally standardized, but in terms of local acceptance, it has that local flavor built into it, so that it makes sense to relate to the customers. So when you talk about and most of these campaigns which global marketing firms do with respect to the global brands, the communication strategies are conceived in the headquarters and implemented at the other host countries. So if you're talking about a global marketing strategy in terms of marketing communication, one has to understand the local nuances or the local parameters very critically and build it into the brand communication, so that every country can design their own communications. So what happens is that you need to decentralize the communication strategic formulation across the globe according to the markets where you are operating. Next, you move into developing a global branding. If you see here, Casper in 2005 talked about three basic facets, like the concept of a brand, the name of a brand, and the product or service that a brand represents, as critical to create alternate globalization, from moving from globalization to customization. So how do you talk about global brands, but with a certain degree of customization? So from standardization to customization also, you can look at that as a continuum. So there are some six types, seven patterns of globalization which he has identified. One is, you can see, is no adaptation, which is mostly followed for luxury brands. Number two, we talk about different positioning strategies. This is again looking into the market. Is a customized kind of a requirement which you do the positioning part. That what does it mean for a given market and position in those markets. Introduction of important product adaptations. For example, when you're talking in terms of adaptations, you're talking about modifying the products according to the brands to the local. The adaptation of Colgate to the herbal, the natural ingredients, is a very natural progression or adaptation in this market. Different positioning and offerings when brands split into companies. For example, there are products which remain the same. The product brand name is same, but in different kind of product categories, they are offered in the marketplace. The case of Geographies is being given here, while the Geographies brand name remains same. It's an excellent brand, whereas Danone also offers a range of dairy products under the Geographies name. So it's a different positioning, but the offerings are mostly split between the companies. The fifth part, very less, of course, we don't see that so much in India. Different brand names in different countries due to cultural sensitivities. For example, in case of sanitary napkins in PNG, it is found that PNG, when we talked about sanitary napkins, in India, the sanitary napkins have got a certain amount of social, if I may say so, social stigma attached to it. Of course, things are becoming better and better. These products were not available, were not accepted by the Indian culture earlier. But today it's a more accepted thing. But when they launched, they found out that since there is a certain amount of a taboo or some kind of a ethical issue associated, they prefer to name the thing as Whisper. They prefer to keep the sanitary napkin brand as a Whisper in order to understand the local requirements. Similarly, as the case here is taken of Burger King is called as Hungry Jack in Australia. When almost similar products are sold under two world brands with different price positioning. For example, certain markets you will find that Volkswagen are priced similar to Audi's entry-level models in certain markets. This is a very classic example looking into the standardized model in terms of the pricing front. Okay, so when you are talking in terms of prices associated, so here what happens, the price is very strongly attached to the kind of brands, the brand image that the brand carries. Second is the local adaptation, as you can see here. In order to, you may go for acquisition of local brands to operate in a given market. The classic example is that of Thumbs Up, which I was referring to earlier, that Coca-Cola in 1996 it entered the Indian market or re-entered the Indian market. They went in for acquiring the brand into the portfolio because that helped them strengthen the market or market acceptance in terms of that brand. Now, how do you monitor the and manage their brands over time? So you know that brands become, they provide value and relationship that they build. What you are, offering them is just maybe the functional part. But over a period of time, when we looked at brand equity and the various models of brand equity, everybody talked about brand awareness leading to proper seed quality, then in terms of what kind of patent it had, what kind of resonance dimensions did it achieve, what kind of an emotional connect it achieved as we went along. So today's when you talk about brands in the global field or over a period of time, the functional, emotional, and the self-expressive part of the value that the brand has created with the customer groups help them to differentiate their brands from their competitive brands and gives a significant competitive advantage if the brand is able to garner in their marketplace. So when you look at the global markets, obviously the part is how do you bring it into this value into the market system. It is possible only by looking into how's the brand built in those markets, looking into the various insights. You need to do a very deep inciting exercise when you are trying to bring out those emotional, when you are trying to bring out those underlying rational and emotional appeals to the customer, so that it has to create a very strong positioning stance when you are able to look into what happens in a given market, what are the fewer nuances that create a very positive vibe with the market, and then build it into your brand communication, whereby what happens, the value perception is better and people perceive better value in terms of their market, in terms of their brand associations. And that also you need to build up by creating the right kind of identity, which we talked about, if you remember, the brand awareness as well as the brand image, which feeds into a very strong brand knowledge. The brand knowledge may come from other market in a different way, but when you're operating in an international market or a global market, one has to observe how that particular image is being perceived by people. Not necessarily the brand which they carry in the international market will be resonated in the host country. So one has to understand the deeper insights that is going and then bring it into the fold and tweak it along with the brands which they are offering, so that there is a certain amount of acceptance and you are able to build on the differential that you want to bring with respect to the competition in the marketplace. Next, we move to what are the levers of sustaining brand value. As you can see here, it can be done. Brand value over a period of time can be done at multiple levels. Changing the product, the basic product offering can be changed. You can augment the product offering. You can change the pricing strategy. You can also change the distribution strategy, and also the communication and positioning, which we have already talked about in the marketplace. So something like this, which can be you can rekindle the brand stories by changing the various aspects of. So generally, you will find that mostly modifying the actual value to the customer by modifying the product, by bringing new products or new services to existing customers, or you can bring completely new products to new customers. You can tweak the pricing, you can tweak the modify the distribution channels. That helps in creating the actual value, but the perceived value comes from the communication strategy. That is the brand communication, the positioning, the image that you want to bring in, if at all you want to augment that. Now, the need for augmenting brand offering comes from that you need to be able to create more value with the customers where you are operating. So in order to sustain value and growth, brands should look at improving their products within their existing product categories, as well as adding new products to the markets, and also look into look at the price strategies which are there. McDonald's came in for, as you can see, we brought in changes in terms of meals, breakfast meals. They also brought in something like the kind of products for corporate lunches for the people. Looking into the breakfast meals with the brand, they wanted to make very healthy additions so that it does not look very greasy, according to the Indian. And of course, many mothers did not like to associate with this greasy kind of a thing. If you look into, they have also gone into extending their product lines in terms of being associated with food joints, with amusement parks, where they come as a kind of a strategic partner. So that also gives them a leverage in terms of being associated with the various products that the customers engage with. We look into the augmentation part of offering, where we are looking into two parts. We are looking into existing customers. Like if you take India as a market, many modifications of the products have been done in order to cater to the Indian market. If we talk about Amazon, which was playing mostly into the shopping basket, they have looked into entertainment as another progression. So they are offering to the existing customers new offerings in the marketplace. Asian Paints, if you see it, they are no longer talking about paints alone. They are also looking into how they can help you consult while you are, what kind of colors, shades, everything. They're bringing consultant to the home and also help them in painting process. So altogether, very different experiences. Cadbury's from Mondelez in India, they've been able to create a completely new category of offerings in terms of Kuch Meetha Ho Jaye, or the celebration of life campaign, wherein they brought in how the chocolate can be used for different occasions to celebrate life. And so obviously what they're doing is they're bringing in from chocolates to dry fruits and trying to tweak the product categories in order to create better association with the marketplace. You could also be offering new products to the market and new customers, products to the new customers. Like one thing that comes very stark example is that of Nexa. Maruti launched Nexa for distribution of select models of product category of brands, because they knew that if they want to offer the high-end products into the marketplace, the customers may not go and buy them from the usual distribution outlet. So they created altogether a different kind of a distribution network to cater to the customers by giving them superior customer experiences, giving them better services out there, much more personalized than what they would get from another outlet, which does not come under Nexa. So Nexa showrooms were branded to give a new experience in terms of distribution. So their product assortments were different from that which of the others as well. Of course, there is a certain premiumness which was attached to the brands. Philips lighting, if you see the T bulb, which was mostly used in the industrial sector or in the electric car segment, earlier the individual customers did not buy it. They were mostly buying the tube lights and those kind of things. There was never in the form of for tea. They identified this as tea bulb can be offered as a good solution where you can just, if you have a bulb socket, it can be used over there, and that created a completely new product for the new customers, that is a consumer segment, and it has really clicked on. Going into the price and distribution levers, we look into the kind of we've already talked about how distribution can play an important role. It's a very good example of Baxter, which has been there, that people who are, they managed to get some renal care fluid bags into the marketplace. So they said that instead of talking about those renal bags, can we in those hospitals, we can provide better services to the customer so that the customer gets better treatment and they survive better, and they also help to bring down the cost of treatment. Of course, they've managed to bring down the offer lower and uniform prices for different types of fluid bags which were used by the nurses. They also catered to give support services like the nurses to the various hospitals, thereby completely changing the price sensitivity in the marketplace by tweaking their offerings in the UK market. If you see here, in case of, again, I would take the example of products which were given to customers in terms of a installment pricing campaign. Maruti followed that if people could buy certain product by giving in form of installments, why not? So those kind of alternate financial schemes were worked out to give better reach to the customers. Uh, Earlier, when you look into the distribution part, distribution is one of the most important levers in terms of enhancing the brand value. We talk about Colgate or HUL. They've been able to reach out to the hinterland of India by very successfully putting the self-help groups of from rural women who go door to door to sell products in villages, and also helps them identify untapped markets and reach out their products to the untapped markets, which was hitherto not possible by the retail counters themselves. So that is again talking in terms of tweaking it for the various geographies. So the last but not the lever, which we talk in terms of the communication lever, is a very powerful tool for marketers. And because most of the campaigns that they work out, you will find that this is where the perception comes into play. Brands like Fair and Lovely, which is now Fair and is now known as the Fair and there's no fairness. It's basically beauty products, which was basically aimed at enhancing the fairness part of the uh, cream for the women. It created a completely new target segment because in this market, in Indian market, women's skin was considered to be a very important thing when it came to marriage. For example, as a child grew, if the child was not fair, they found that Fair and Lovely managed to was considered to be almost like a in thing which was there. It created a very strong position in the marketplace, the core benefit of a glowing skin or a fair skin to the customers. But today's market, of course, those have been criticized very heavily that we are trying to impose racism, and today HUL has changed the name of its brand name from it, the word fair has been dropped from the brand, and where they're looking into only talking about the feeling good factor of the customer. Uh, when we talk about open happiness campaign, something which Coca-Cola adopted it. Um, Open happiness was considered to be, if you talk about Coke, in terms of Coca-Cola, what different can it make? So they thought of, always we find that there is an effort to build more value by associating with the right kind of takeaways. The When you look into the open happiness campaign, it was like a when you're consuming the brand, they managed to bring in brand communication where it said the full family engages with the customer with the usage of the brand. Whereas Pepsi talks about it's very individualistic, so that's a different kind of a take. Whereas Thumbs Up had a more of an aggressive stance in making the feel the energy, the enthusiasm that is associated with the brand, because they had that taste the thunder kind of a tagline. If you see Coca-Cola, further they managed to they run a campaign which is called the Hug Me campaign, where an effort was made to personalize the brand. So they put up those outlets where you can get those Coca-Cola cans by popping up. You have to step up, hug the machine, and then the Coca-Cola machine, vending machine would give out a can. So that really made people feel something different. So there was a degree of personalization that was built into the brand. As a result, they managed to connect with the brand in a big way. So these are few strategies where you can see it in today's market that as brands manage to go to from a domestic to a international market, there are a lot of things that you need to build in terms of not only the product adaptation, pricing, distribution, but also the promotion in order to give more value addition. And going forward, you need to also look into how this particular brand can be managed to give better equity in the long run and stay in that market for a longer period of time. We have looked at the internationalization process does not look into one particular geographical location. It talks about a systematic way of increasing from the domestic market to the host market, looking into the global ambitions of the brand. And furthermore, when we talk about brand strength and market dominance, your globalization plays a very, very important role in increasing the brand valuation. With this, we come to the end of understand the global imperatives of global management systems for brands and how it can be leveraged across the global markets. Thank you.